Spotlight is proudly sponsored by HEC Media, St. Louis's home for arts, education, and culture.
The thing I'm interested in is the cultural and historical context.
You feel the sense of freedom. It gives you such a positive energy.
We're reflecting on what's important, what isn't, and learning more of who we are.
Today on Spotlight, remembering civil rights activist Frankie Freeman, the first woman appointed by the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Plus, we sit down with the author of one of the most anticipated thrillers of 2022. And then art that examines introspection, memory, grief, and identity. But first, how SLU engineers are retrofitting a puck for blind hockey clubs. It's Sunday, and you're watching the multiple Emmy Award-winning Spotlight.
What I particularly enjoy about blind hockey is the fact that in many respects, we're suited up and dressed up like every other regular hockey player. You feel the sense of freedom. It gives you such a positive energy, and you can just forget about everything else that's going on in your life and focus truly on this sport.
Blind hockey, the sport itself, has been over 50 years in Canada, and about 6 years ago it came to St. Louis.
Right on. All right, let's hit the ice.
The rules of the blind hockey deviate slightly from the regular hockey to accommodate visual impairments. But the sport, it really does feel like regular hockey. I think that's the biggest advantage that we got is we are just as intense when it comes to playing the sport. We like to go as fast as we possibly can.
So the puck, it's steel and it has 8 ball bearings in it, which it's nice and loud. But when the puck stops, those balls stop moving inside the puck, and so the puck stops making noise.
When that puck stops moving, you'll see it in a game. It'll look just like regular hockey, and then the puck stops moving. All of a sudden, nobody knows where it is. You've got the flow going back and forth, and it's a fast pace. And then the puck, they lose that puck, and you can see instantly the effect that it has on the game.
Behind you. Keep going.
We already have difficulty finding pucks that are not in motion, but if it gets dented enough, eventually the ball bearings have limited range of motion within the puck, so the volumes just kind of die off.
They don't last too long. They're made out of a thin metal, and eventually they'll crack or just go dead, and they're not in use anymore. And they're about $50 or $60 a piece. And there's only one way to get them, and that's through USA Hockey. And they only get them, once a year, and they distribute it through all the clubs and things. So we're kind of forced to hold on to them, even though they're in pretty bad shape sometimes.
We are in the PATH Suite, which stands for the People and Technology Horizon Suite. And it's situated within the Interdisciplinary Science and Engineering building on SLU's campus. We're interested in how to infuse touch and touch feedback back into technologies and innovations that we use today. It's a fun way to think about engineering for sure.
I wanted to see about putting a band in the middle.
So I'm very involved within the blind community and the St. Louis regional network that's associated with it. So we started getting acquainted with the team, we started going to the practices, we met with the coaches and the players, and really started feeling out how does the game work, what's the feel of the game.
Currently, the puck they use is about 40-year-old design, and it works for what it does, but there's definitely a lot of drawbacks with it.
And we shopped around some initial ideas. We said, we heard what you said. Here's what we're thinking. What do you think?
That's not as dense and heavy as I thought it was going to be.
The enthusiasm of the players just really sold me because no matter even just the smallest improvements to the puck made them so excited to what I was going to be producing.
We were really blessed because we have one of the blind hockey players here at St. Louis University.
Not bad. Still pretty audible.
Did you hear it?
Yeah.
So that was a natural fit. He's just a great person. He's tech-focused. He has the right mindset to really think innovatively, so he was an immediate add.
As a blind hockey player myself, I'm super passionate about finding ways that will enhance the quality of the sport.
Oh yeah, I don't know if I talked to you about this, but there was a lot of different feedback on the buzzer frequency.
Oh really?
Actually, yeah.
So we've been kind of bouncing off ideas of how we could take this puck project into 2 different directions. I think we're pretty clear on where we want to go as far as the puck development goes.
So this is the current puck, and this cage is meant to wrap around the puck here to protect it here. And then so these holes are designed to basically allow the sound to still travel out. We're also working on kind of using these rings here, integrating electronics on the inside of the puck here to house those electronics and those vibration motors. So as the puck's sliding, it'll stop moving and then kind of vibrate and rattle here. So even when it stops on the ice, it's still going to be giving auditory feedback that players can then track and then pass it to their teammates. The fully electronic puck uses a circuit board, 2 9-volt batteries, a speaker, and then an amplifying cone. And so with that, this circuit board basically develops that white noise static. The one thing we've been working on is kind of, developing the puck to have what's called dynamic feedback. So as it's moving, it's going to make a different noise. So if it's moving faster, it'll make a different noise. So if I turn this on here and shake it, it's going to have a different feedback of if it's slowing down. And so that lets players know if someone hits a really hard slap shot, hey, this puck's moving fast at me, I better get ready, while it has that kind of slower, what's called a duty cycle of it being on and off and kind of alternating between the 2.
I think you're onto something.
Okay, thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
The hope is that they will have a hockey puck that everyone in the league, both in the U.S. and Canada, that can last a long time, meets the sound quality that they like, and is ultimately effective in the games.
I think the work we do, I hope, will really benefit the greater blind hockey community. This is very much a growing sport, and I feel like the outcome would more so yield to other adapted sports as well.
I'm really excited, and it's going to be the next big thing. Having a standardized puck that everyone uses and that everyone's happy with, that continuously makes noise, would help us on our journey towards the Paralympics.
Let's get it, boys.
There's something about ice skating, and you combine that with the stick handling, with the puck that makes noise, and passing to other players. It's super rewarding.
Nice.
Scan the QR code on your screen to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
Frankie Muse Freeman wore many hats in her remarkable 101 years on this planet.
I have been appointed as the first female commissioner of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights. Served for 16 years under 4 presidents.
Wife, mother, lawyer, and civil rights activist. As a youth in her hometown of Danville, Virginia, Freeman regularly faced racial discrimination and promised herself that she would find a way to fight the bias she faced on a daily basis.
We walked to school because our parents did not, it was absolutely racially segregated, and so black people were expected to sit in the back of the bus and no way. So we walked wherever we had to go, unless we were riding in a car. But we would not. One of the things that our parents agreed was that there are things in terms of the segregation that you had no choice. But if you had a choice, you rejected it. I graduated from Howard in 1947, second in my class. By that time, I was married, I had a daughter. I was determined I was going to become a lawyer, but I was not going to do anything that was less than what a wife and mother would do. So I would get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and do my homework while I was a student there. Thurgood Marshall, when I graduated, offered me a job working for the NAACP. But my husband was from St. Louis, so there was no question but that we were going to be coming to and live in St. Louis.
Freeman spent her life fighting discrimination and helping to establish civil rights policies, including helping to end school and housing discrimination in St. Louis.
I left Howard and came to St. Louis thinking that maybe I could at least become a member of the staff of one of the law schools. And that was not the case with respect to either the white ones or the lawyer. They were going to give me a job, but I was determined that I was going to try cases and I was going to be a trial lawyer. I was denied. Then I told Shelby, my husband, well, I'm going to open my own law office, and that's what I did. And I associated myself with the NAACP and told them I'd be available. For Bruton versus Board of Education, filed in 1949. It was my first civil rights case, which we handled, and we won it in the circuit court. There's an individual responsibility for each one of us to do our homework and make it better. And I'm hoping that each one of us will do our homework and make it better.
HEC Media. Recognized, celebrated, honored time and again for excellence in the industry. Mid-America Emmys, Tellys, NATOAs, Auroras, and other awards. HEC Media has been bringing home the hardware for over a decade. Hundreds of nominations and wins, from regional to international levels. Arts and education to author talks, magazine shows and documentaries, individual craft achievements to overall excellence, plus so much more. And although doing good work is its own reward, recognition, well, it's nice too. See what all the fuss is about. Find all of the award-winning content at hecmedia.org.
The historic contributions of Black chefs, later on Spotlight.
New York Times bestselling novelist and screenwriter Lisa Lutz is beloved by mystery readers for her witty page-turners filled with quirky, unforgettable characters. Her novels include the 6 comic crime novels in the popular Spellman series, which introduced a family of eccentric private investigators, as well as several standalone thrillers, including The Swallows and The Passenger. Lutz's newest novel, The Accomplice, is one of the most anticipated thrillers of 2022. Following a suspiciously tight friendship that turns deadly twice, The Accomplice is a twisty, darkly comic mystery that keeps readers guessing until the last word. For today's conversation, Lisa is joined by her friend and fellow suspense writer, internationally best-selling novelist Megan Abbott. Abbott is the Edgar Award-winning author of 10 thrillers, including The Turnout, Give Me Your Hand, and Dare Me.
I think it's one of my favorite books of the last several years. I mean, I just cannot get enough of it. And just to sort of lay the premise out, this is a pair of best friends, Luna and Owen, who both at different points in their life became suspects in a murder investigation, which in some ways it's like a kind of a high concept premise. And I just wonder what the seed for that came from.
I mean, I actually didn't think of it in any way as being high concept. I think I had like the very frame of the story, so I sort of knew I'd write about friends, but I don't know that I was wed to the whole platonic thing even at first. But it was the first time I had a story where I knew the ending, like I knew the twist before I really had the whole story. So then that takes away a lot of the work. And then it was really about like, how do I keep myself from getting bored writing? And then I just sort of explored relationships. Like I always like unusual relationships. So that was my big thing. Like I want to get into this platonic relationship that over many years, and the way people change and the way they adjust their behavior. with each other over time. I also, because there are two different timelines, I love seeing where someone is in one point in time and then revisiting them later, and having part of the mystery be just how they got to that other place in life. I love that kind of thing. I always like not knowing something and getting it answered.
Yes, and that telescoping back and forth in time with Owen and Luna at the center, and how much their lives change, but how some element in their relationship is sort of eternal, is so interesting. You also, the thing like I always think is a sign of a great writer is when secondary characters aren't just there because of the thing they have, the service they have to perform in the book. You know, this is the cop or the waitress, diner waitress, or any of these things. And I think one of the things you do is you give them all something. There's something you're giving them, and maybe that's sort of what's reading is what you don't normally get that.
There's always this effort, like when you're writing, to like care a little bit about everyone in some way. So, I mean, I really liked writing the cops because they are secondary characters, but once you give them a little bit of life or a background or anything, it's much more interesting to write them. And then there are different directions you can go. It gives you a lot more freedom.
This has been so fun. And I want to tell everybody again to buy this book. It is really just an absolute, I just wanted to, even looking at it again this morning, I wanted to read the whole thing again. And I've been seeing the responses creeping in, and everyone seems to feel the same way, and I'm not surprised. So I can't wait to have it get out there in the world.
Thanks so much for doing this, Megan.
To find out why she loves writing eccentric characters in her books, watch the full interview at hecmedia.org. On March 1st, 1912, the first parachute jump from an airplane took place in St. Louis when U.S. Army Captain Albert Berry took off from Kinloch Field and jumped out over Jefferson Barracks Army Base. The jump was 1,500 feet, and it took an estimated 500 feet for the chute to fill with air. 2 years later, the pilot of the plane, Tony Janis, would achieve fame as the first airline pilot.
We are at the Foundry Art Center, and currently we have 3 exhibitions on view. We have Rachel Ferguson's Inside Voices, Judy Duggan-McCormack's The Absence of Presence, and Calvin Duncan's Through This Window Another Side. So with these exhibitions, there is certainly a thread that runs through each of them that is, I think, very timely. It deals with a lot of introspection, memory, grief, thinking about identity, studying identity, and we're going into our 3rd year of a pandemic, and I think a lot of people can relate to these exhibitions because of these topics. When you first walk into our main galleries, you'll see Rachel Ferguson's exhibition, Inside Voices, and her work is these beautiful figurative paintings. It's very simple compositions. It focuses on the figure, but without using the male gaze. They're beautifully single source lit, and a focus on detail that is just exquisite. So you'll want to spend a lot of time with her work and really getting a sense for the body language and how all of that comes through. As you move into Gallery 2, you will get a chance to see Judy Duggan-McCormack's exhibition, which focuses on memory and grieving and loss. So a lot of her works vary from images of gravestones to funerary customs. And there are some personal images in this collection of a family tree, of a mother who's passed, and you're able to reflect a lot within Judy's exhibition. And then as you move into Gallery 3, you'll have Calvin Duncan's exhibition, who originally is from Peevely, Missouri, and now lives in Chicago, Illinois. Calvin's work, they're cyanotypes, which is an alternative photographic process, which creates this beautiful blue. And what Calvin's doing in their work is examining family photos and relics And as they create the cyanotypes, they're working through their own identity as a queer artist during a pandemic. With these 3 exhibitions, there's something very poignant and helpful for those walking through to kind of help sort through the topics of mourning, death, even body language and reflection based on what we're going through right now as a society. We're reflecting on what's important, what isn't, and learning more of who we are. These exhibitions will be on view through March 19th, and to learn more, visit us online at foundryartcenter.org.
Go to hecmedia.org for the arts and authors,
Completely accidental because I never set out to write a book.
science and history, culture and community,
It's considered to be the oldest organic farm west of the Mississippi.
education, films,
Finding the coin places the site firmly in the 13th century.
what's happening now around St. Louis, and more. See for yourself at hecmedia.org.
To think of African American cooking as simply a modern-day version of soul food is to think of a gumbo as simply a soup. Even while under slavery, black cooks created a distinctly American foodway, one that blends Southern cooking with European and Native American influences. Their talents earned them the respect of slave owners and employers, and that impact is felt still today. A book by Washington University professor Rafia Zafar examines the historic contributions of black chefs. Recipes for Respect is not a cookbook. Instead, it's an examination of the intersection of African American culture, history, and food.
It notes that she was awarded 2 medals for best pickles and sauces and best...
To Dr. Zafar, cookbooks are a form of literature. In them, she finds revelations about African American history, especially when the author is a former slave. For example, an orientation clause, the sentence that explains a recipe, reveals a lot about a cook's life beyond the kitchen.
I concluded to bring forward a book of my knowledge based on an experience of upwards of 35 years in the art of cooking.
That's what I love about cookbooks. You have to read between the lines.
Although Dr. Zafar's book is academic, she is a professor after all. It's peppered with characters who jump off the page. Many of the chefs she writes about were former slaves, like Abby Fisher, whose book, What Mrs. Fisher Knows About Old Southern Cooking, was published in 1881.
Abby Fisher was from the Deep South, ended up in San Francisco, where she's listed in directories as a pickle maker and a caterer. And she became well known for her expertise, the deliciousness of the things she made. And she had a group of well-off white San Francisco women who encouraged her to write a cookbook. There's no mention of her background. There's no mention of her race, only that she is someone who, she says in the introduction that she did not have the benefit of an education. And then there are only 3 recipes that either glancingly or about as explicitly as you can get refer to a life spent, if not literally in slavery, in a slave society. One for blackberry syrup, one for hoe cakes, and one for what she calls infant pat.
Take 1 pint of flour, sifted and tied up in a clean cloth securely tight.
And it's actually an incredible thing for a black woman in the South to say. Particularly if it was in slavery, that meant she wasn't separated from her children. If she was a woman of any sort in the 19th century, that she gave birth and raised that many children is also phenomenal, because the infant maternal mortality rates in the 19th century were very, very high. So she's kind of bragging. It's a humble brag, but it's a real brag.
And there is Melinda Russell, whose 1866 pamphlet of recipes is the earliest known cookbook by an African American.
When you read her cookbook, she has a slave narrative, the story of her family, prefacing her cookbook.
I was born in Washington County, and raised in Greene County in the eastern part of Tennessee. My mother was a member of one of the first families set free by Mr. Noddy of Richmond.
Essentially saying we were slaves, and this is a good cookbook, because even by that point, the idea that there were black people who were in the kitchen and were sophisticated cooks, great cooks, was already starting to take hold of the American consciousness.
Former slave Rufus Estes was heralded for his fine cooking, enjoyed by royalty and heads of state on luxury Pullman cars. His cookbook was published in 1911 and includes an entire chapter on sauces. And with instructions that could be lifted from Downton Abbey, Butler Robert Roberts' 1827 book was a guide to proper hospitality in a well-to-do household.
When your cloth is perfectly even, then put round your plates, laying 4 at each side. Then put round your knives and forks, placing your knives at the right hand with the edge of the blade toward the...
He tells you how to polish silver, certain remedies like for hangover, but also just how to run a household correctly. And of course, the irony of this is that African Americans were at the time thought of as dirty and savage and all that. But it was a black man who wrote this hospitality book that at least one Confederate general had in his library.
A hangover remedy would have been particularly helpful after one of Tom Bullock's concoctions. He worked at the St. Louis Country Club as a mixologist in the years before Prohibition. In the foreword to the book, The Ideal Bartender, Tom's skills with a shaker were lauded by presidential grandfather and great-grandfather George Herbert Walker. Where does this interest in food intersect with academia? Dr. Safar says food became a fascination in childhood during time spent in her grandmother's Harlem kitchen.
She made oxtail. I mean, things we now might think of as sort of soul food, right? Fried chicken. She always had greens. The thing I'm kind of interested in terms of literature is not only the way a sentence or a story is put together, but the cultural and the historical context. I saw how much what anthropologists call foodways, how much that has to do with the creation of black literature and how black authors specifically use their knowledge of foodways to sort of construct a black literary or entrepreneurial civil rights identity.
Next week, a WashU researcher works to provide hope to patients with a deadly brain tumor. Plus, the science of heartbreak, how it affects your body, and what to do to help yourself. Thanks for watching Spotlight. Join us next Sunday at 9:30 a.m. on KPLR 11.